The crystal chandeliers of the Grand Meridian Hotel cast dancing shadows across the marble floors as Violet Hayes stood at the entrance of the ballroom, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched her small evening purse. The dress she wore, a simple emerald green gown, had been hanging in her closet for 3 years, saved for occasions that never seemed to arrive. Tonight, her twin sister Scarlett had insisted she attend this charity gala, promising it would be good for her to step outside her comfortable world of classrooms and bedtime stories. Violet took a deep breath and stepped inside. The room was filled with people who belonged to a universe far removed from her own. Women glided past in gowns that probably cost more than her monthly rent, their jewelry catching the light like tiny stars. Men in perfectly tailored suits stood, in clusters, discussing business deals and investment opportunities with the casual confidence of those who had never worried about making ends meet. At 28, Violet had built a life she was proud of, even if it looked humble compared to this glittering display of wealth. She taught second grade at Riverside Elementary, a school in a neighborhood where most children came from struggling families. Every morning, she arrived early to make sure her classroom was warm and welcoming, filled with colorful posters and books that opened windows to different worlds. Her daughter Mia, 6 years old with bright eyes and an endless supply of questions, was the center of her universe. After Mia's father had left when she was just a baby, Violet had learned to be both mother and father, provider and protector. Their apartment was small, but it was filled with laughter and love, with finger paintings on the refrigerator and bedtime stories that stretched long past the prescribed ending because Mia always wanted to know what happened next. Violet's gaze swept across the ballroom until she spotted her sister. Scarlett stood near the bar, surrounded by a group of elegantly dressed people who hung on her every word. Even from a distance, Violet could see the difference between them. Though they shared the same face, the same dark hair and brown eyes, Scarlett had always known how to polish herself into something that demanded attention. Her red dress hugged her figure perfectly, her hair was styled in elaborate waves, and her laugh carried across the room with practiced charm. Scarlett worked as a senior marketing executive at Preston & Associates, one of the most prestigious firms in the city. She had climbed her way up through a combination of talent and ruthless ambition, never letting anything stand between her and success. 6 months ago, she had gotten engaged to Richard Morgan, a successful investment banker, whose family name opened doors across the country. Scarlett had always wanted to be at the center of the social elite, and Richard was her ticket to that world. As Violet approached, Scarlett turned and smiled, a gesture that did not quite reach her eyes. "Violet, you made it. I was starting to worry you had changed your mind." She air-kissed both of Violet's cheeks, her perfume expensive and overwhelming. "Come, let me introduce you to some people." Violet allowed herself to be guided through the crowd, shaking hands and exchanging polite greetings with people whose names she immediately forgot. She felt like an imposter, a teacher in borrowed clothes pretending to belong among titans of industry and society, darlings. Yet she smiled and nodded, grateful that Scarlett seemed to be making an effort to include her tonight. What Violet did not know was that every step she took was part of a carefully orchestrated plan. 3 weeks earlier, Scarlett had been at a different charity event when she overheard a conversation that made her blood run cold. 2 board members of Thornwood Industries were discussing their CEO, Julian Thornwood, and his search for someone to lead his new charitable foundation. One of them mentioned that Julian had been impressed by a teacher named Violet Hayes, whom he had seen volunteering at a community center, reading to children and organizing donation drives with such genuine warmth that it had moved him deeply. Scarlett had felt her stomach twist with jealousy. Julian Thornwood was exactly the kind of man she had always dreamed of attracting. At 34, he was not just wealthy but powerful, running a technology empire that had revolutionized healthcare data systems. He was also famously private, rarely attending social events since his wife had died in a hiking accident 3 years ago. The fact that he had noticed Violet, quiet, unremarkable Violet, felt like a personal insult. So Scarlett had devised tonight's plan. She would invite Violet to the gala, knowing Julian would be there as the keynote speaker. Then, at precisely the right moment, she would orchestrate an accident that would humiliate Violet in front of everyone, especially Julian. It would remind her sister of her place, would show the world that Violet was clumsy and unsuitable for high society, and would eliminate any chance of Julian's interest developing further. Scarlett had enlisted the help of Brandon Pierce, a colleague, who owed her a favor and enjoyed causing trouble. He stood across the room now, waiting for her signal. The plan was simple. When Violet walked past the refreshment table where Julian would be standing, Brandon would bump into her at precisely the right angle, causing her to spill her wine all over Julian's expensive suit. The humiliation would be complete, and Scarlett would swoop in to comfort Julian, positioning herself as the sophisticated sister who truly belonged in his world. As the evening progressed, Violet found herself actually enjoying parts of the night. The ballroom was beautiful, the music was lovely, and she had struck up a conversation with a pediatrician who shared her passion for improving educational access for underprivileged children. For a moment, she forgot about feeling out of place. Then, Scarlett appeared at her elbow with a glass of red wine. "Here, you look like you need this. Come, I want to show you the art collection near the north wing. Some incredible pieces." Violet accepted the glass, noting its generous pour, and followed her sister through the crowd. They wound their way past clusters of guests until they reached a quieter area where several paintings hung on the walls. Violet paused to admire. A landscape, the wine glass balanced carefully in her hand. What she did not see was Julian Thornwood approaching from the opposite direction. He had just finished his keynote speech about corporate responsibility and was trying to escape to a quieter corner to gather his thoughts. He was tall, with dark hair beginning to silver at the temples, and eyes that held both intelligence and a deep sadness. He moved with quiet confidence, the kind that came from knowing his own worth without needing to announce it. Scarlett saw him first. Her heart raced as she recognized the opportunity. This was the moment. She caught Brandon's eye across the room and gave a subtle nod. Everything was in position. Julian was about to walk directly past Violet, close enough that any spilled wine would hit him squarely. Brandon began moving through the crowd, his trajectory calculated to intersect with Violet at precisely the wrong moment. Violet sensed movement behind her and began to turn, the wine glass still in her hand. The painting before her showed a sunset, over mountains, peaceful and serene, completely unaware of the storm about to break. In that frozen second before collision, everything hung in perfect, terrible balance. The trap was set, and Violet Hayes, who had come tonight hoping only to support her sister and perhaps enjoy one elegant evening away from her everyday worries, was about to become the center of attention in the worst possible way. Brandon Pierce moved through the crowd with practiced precision, his eyes locked on Violet Hayes as she stood admiring the painting. Everything was timed perfectly. Scarlett watched from her position near a marble column, her pulse quickening with anticipation. In 3 seconds, maybe 4, Violet would crash into Brandon, the wine would fly from her glass, and Julian Thornwood would be drenched in expensive red liquid. The humiliation would be complete, and Violet would be exposed as the clumsy, unsophisticated outsider Scarlett had always believed her to be. Brandon was 2 steps away. Violet sensed the movement and began to turn. The wine glass tilted in her hand. Julian Thornwood, who had been walking with his head down, reviewing notes on his phone, looked up at precisely that moment. The collision happened exactly as planned. Brandon's shoulder connected with Violet's back. She stumbled forward with a startled gasp, and the wine glass flew from her hand in a wide arc. Red wine splashed through the air like liquid rubies, catching the chandelier light before gravity. claimed it. The entire contents of the glass landed squarely across Julian's white dress shirt and the front of his charcoal suit jacket, spreading in a dark stain that looked almost black against the expensive fabric. Time seemed to stop. Conversations around them faltered and died as heads turned to witness the disaster. Violet stood frozen, her hand still outstretched where the glass had been, her face draining of all color. The empty wine glass had shattered on the marble floor, scattering crystal fragments that sparkled like cruel stars around her borrowed shoes. Scarlet stepped forward from her hiding place, her expression carefully arranged into shocked concern, ready to swoop in and console Julian while subtly highlighting how inappropriate Violet was for this environment. She had her speech prepared, had practiced the perfect blend of sympathy for Julian and gentle disapproval of her clumsy sister. But Julian's reaction stopped her mid-stride. Instead of anger, instead of the outburst everyone expected, Julian looked down at his ruined shirt and began to laugh. Not a polite chuckle, not a forced sound to ease social tension, but genuine, warm laughter that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside him. The sound was so unexpected, so completely wrong for the situation, that people stared in confusion. "That," Julian said, his voice carrying clearly in the stunned silence, "is absolutely my fault." He looked up at Violet, who was trembling with mortification, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I was not watching where I was walking. I am so sorry." Violet shook her head frantically, finding her voice. "No, I am the one who should apologize. Your suit, it is ruined. I did not mean to. I will pay for the cleaning. I am so sorry." Julian stepped closer, crunching over broken glass, and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. His gray eyes held nothing but kindness. "Please do not apologize. Honestly, I have been looking for an excuse to escape these formal events. This suit has survived countless boring board meetings. A little wine is probably what it needed to make things interesting." He pulled off his jacket and looked around until a server appeared with a cloth. As he dabbed at the stain with no apparent concern, he extended his other hand to Violet. "Julian Thornwood, and you must be Violet Hayes." Violet's mouth fell open. "You know who I am?" "I do." His smile was genuine, transforming his serious features into something approachable and warm. "I have been hoping to meet you for weeks, actually. I saw you at the Riverside Community Center last month. You were reading to a group of children, doing all the character voices from that dragon book. You had them absolutely captivated." Scarlet, still frozen several feet away, felt the floor seem to tilt beneath her expensive heels. This was not how the scene was supposed to unfold. Julian was supposed to be angry, embarrassed, eager to get away from the clumsy woman who had ruined his evening. Instead, he looked at Violet like she was the only person in the room. "I was there making a site visit for potential partnership opportunities," Julian continued, still holding Violet's hand, seemingly unaware that he had not let go. "But I ended up staying for your entire reading session. The way you connected with those children, the genuine care you showed, it was remarkable. I asked the center director about you afterward. She told me about your work at Riverside Elementary, about the after-school programs you started with your own money, about how you spend your weekends organizing book drives and tutoring sessions." Violet felt heat rising to her cheeks, but this time it was not from embarrassment. "I just do what I can. Those children deserve every opportunity." "Exactly." Julian's expression grew more animated. "That is exactly the philosophy I have been trying to find someone to embody. I am launching a new charitable foundation focused on educational equity, and I have been searching for someone to lead it. Someone who understands the work from the ground up, who has lived it, not just studied it in business school. Would you consider having dinner with me tomorrow night? Not a date," he added quickly, though something in his eyes suggested he would not mind if it were. "But a business discussion. I would love to hear your ideas." The crowd around them had begun to disperse, whispers spreading like wildfire through the ballroom. Scarlet felt eyes turning toward her, saw the knowing looks, the barely concealed smirks. People were putting the pieces together. The twin sisters, the dramatic wine spill, the CEO's unexpected reaction. What should have been Violet's humiliation had somehow transformed into her triumph. Brandon Pierce had already slipped away, recognizing a failed operation when he saw one. Richard Morgan, Scarlett's fiancé, appeared at her elbow with a strange expression on his face. "Did you have something to do with this?" he asked quietly. "That man who bumped into your sister, I saw you signal him earlier," Scarlett forced, a bright smile though her jaw ached with the effort. "Do not be ridiculous. It was just an accident." But her voice lacked conviction, and Richard's eyes narrowed with suspicion. Meanwhile, Julian had guided Violet to a quiet corner, away from the crowd, still completely unconcerned about his stained shirt. They sat in 2 chairs near a tall window overlooking the city lights, and Julian leaned forward with genuine interest as Violet began to talk about her students, about the challenges they faced, about her dreams for what education could be if only there were more resources and support. He listened with the kind of attention that made her feel heard, truly heard, perhaps for the first time in years. He asked thoughtful questions, challenged her ideas in ways that made them stronger, and shared his own vision for systematic change in educational access. The conversation flowed naturally, both of them forgetting the party around them, forgetting the stares and whispers, forgetting everything except the unexpected connection forming between them. Violet learned that Julian's late wife had been a teacher, that her passion for education had been one of the things he loved most about her, and that this foundation was partially a tribute to her memory. His voice softened when he spoke about her, and Violet saw the grief still living in the corners of his eyes. But she also saw hope, saw someone ready to pour his pain into purpose. When Violet finally checked her phone and saw how late it had become, she startled. "I need to go. My daughter's babysitter has school in the morning." "You have a daughter?" Julian's smile grew wider. "Tell me about her." And so Violet did, her whole face lighting up as she described Mia's curiosity, her artwork, her endless questions about how the world worked. Julian listened with the same careful attention, and when they finally stood to leave, exchanging phone numbers and confirming dinner plans for the next evening, Scarlett watched from across the ballroom with barely contained fury. Her plan had not just failed, it had backfired spectacularly. And as she watched Julian hold the door for Violet, saw the way he looked at her sister with respect and genuine interest, Scarlett knew that this was only the beginning. The following Tuesday morning arrived with autumn sunshine streaming through the windows of Riverside Elementary School. Violet stood at the front of her classroom, helping her students with their math worksheets, when the principal's voice crackled over the intercom requesting her presence in the main office. Her heart jumped nervously. In 5 years of teaching, she had never been summoned during class time. Her teaching assistant took over as Violet hurried down the hallway, smoothing her simple blue cardigan and wondering if she had forgotten some important paperwork. When she pushed open the office door, she stopped short. Julian Thornwood stood in the small waiting area, looking somehow both perfectly in place and entirely out of context in his elegant navy suit. Beside him stood a woman with silver hair and kind eyes, holding a leather portfolio. "Mr. Thornwood," Violet breathed, suddenly aware of the chalk dust on her hands and the crayon mark on her sleeve from where little Tommy had accidentally drawn during story time. "What are you doing here?" Julian's face broke into that warm smile she had been replaying in her mind since the gala 3 nights ago. They had met for dinner as planned, talking for 4 hours until the restaurant staff had politely suggested they were closing. The conversation had flowed even more naturally than at the party, and when Julian had walked her to her car, she had felt something shift inside her chest, something she had not felt in years. "I wanted to see your world," Julian said simply. This is Patricia Chen, my Director of Charitable Operations. We have a proposal we would like to discuss with you and your principal. Principal Henderson emerged from her office, her usual stern expression softening with curiosity. Within minutes, they were all seated around a conference table as Patricia opened her portfolio and began presenting a proposal that made Violet's breath catch. Julian wanted to donate $500,000 to Riverside Elementary, funding after school, programs, art supplies, technology upgrades, and a new library. But more than that, he wanted Violet to lead the pilot program that would eventually expand to schools across the district. Your vision is exactly what we need, Julian explained, his eyes never leaving Violet's face. Someone who understands these children because she works with them every day. Someone who knows that education is not just about test scores, but about seeing potential in every student. Violet felt tears prickling her eyes. This was beyond anything she had ever dreamed possible. Principal Henderson looked equally moved, already asking questions about implementation timelines and program structures. The meeting stretched on, filled with excitement and possibility, until Patricia excused herself to take a phone call. That was when Scarlett arrived. She swept into the office without knocking, her designer heels clicking sharply against the linoleum floor. Richard followed behind her, his expression troubled and reluctant. Scarlett carried a manila folder and wore the triumphant look of someone holding a winning hand. "How convenient that I found you all here," Scarlett announced, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Before my sister accepts any generous offers, I think Mr. Thornwood deserves to know the truth about her character." Violet stood slowly, confusion and dread warring in her stomach. "Scarlett, what are you doing?" "Protecting a good man from being taken advantage of." Scarlett opened the folder and spread several printed pages across the table. "These are bank statements showing unusual deposits into Violet's account over the past 3 months. And here," she tapped another page, "are emails I discovered where she discusses researching wealthy philanthropists and their charitable interests. She has been planning this for months, positioning herself to catch the attention of someone exactly like you, Julian." The room fell silent. Principal Henderson looked shocked. Richard shifted uncomfortably. Julian's face was unreadable. Violet felt the blood drain from her face as she looked at the documents. The bank statements were real, showing deposits she could explain. She had been selling her lesson plans and educational materials online to make extra money for Mia's upcoming birthday. The emails were taken completely out of context, part of a group project with other teachers researching grant opportunities for their schools. "This is not what it looks like," Violet said, her voice shaking. "Those deposits are from my teaching materials business, and those emails were for a professional development course I took." "How convenient," Scarlett sneered. "Always an excuse. Face it, Julian, she saw an opportunity and took it. The Devoted Teacher Act is just that, an act." Julian stood slowly, and Violet braced herself for the disappointment she was certain she would see in his eyes. Instead, he turned to face Scarlett, with an expression of cold steel. "I already know about everything in that folder," he said quietly. "My security team conducted a thorough background check on Violet before I ever approached her at the gala. I know about her teaching materials business. I know about the grant research. I know she donates 10% of every paycheck to her school's emergency fund for students in crisis. I know she once gave a homeless student and his mother her own apartment for 3 weeks while she slept on a friend's couch, helping them find housing. I know everything, Scarlett, and none of it changes my opinion of your sister." He took a step closer to Scarlett, his voice dropping lower but somehow more powerful. "What I also know is that you orchestrated the wine incident at the gala. My assistant witnessed you instructing Brandon Pierce on exactly when and how to bump into Violet. She recorded the entire conversation on her phone because she found your behavior suspicious." Scarlett's face went white. Richard stepped back from her, understanding dawning in his eyes. Julian continued, his voice now carrying a weight of disappointment. I had hoped you would accept that your plan failed and move on. Instead, you fabricated evidence and attempted to sabotage your own sister's opportunity. This foundation is being built on principles of integrity and genuine care for others. Your actions demonstrate neither. Patricia returned to the room, having heard the commotion. She placed a supportive hand on Violet's shoulder as Julian turned back to address everyone. Violet Hayes is exactly the person I have been searching for to lead this foundation. Not because of any manipulation or scheme, but because she has dedicated her life to serving others with authenticity and compassion. The position is hers, if she wants it. Richard cleared his throat, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. Scarlett, we need to talk. Outside. Now. The way he said it made clear their conversation would not be pleasant. As they left, Scarlett shot one last, venomous look at her sister, but it lacked the power it once held. She had been exposed, and everyone in that room now saw her clearly. After they departed, Violet sank into her chair, overwhelmed by everything that had just happened. Julian knelt beside her, his voice gentle. I am sorry you had to experience that. Your sister's actions are not a reflection on you. Why did you defend me? Violet asked, looking up at him with wonder. You barely know me. I know enough, Julian said softly. I know that when you read to children, you give every character a different voice because you want them to fall in love with stories. I know that you keep granola bars in your desk for students who come to school hungry. I know that you stay late every day to help anyone who needs it. And I know that when someone tries to humiliate you, you do not lash out in revenge. You just keep being kind. That tells me everything I need to know. 2 weeks later, Violet stood in front of her, classroom for the last time as a full-time teacher. She had accepted Julian's offer, though she negotiated to continue teaching one class per week because she could not imagine completely leaving her students. The foundation position would allow her to impact thousands of children instead of just 30, to change systems instead of just individual lives. Julian had also become a constant presence in her life and Mia's. He had met her daughter the previous weekend, bringing art supplies and spending 2 hours on the floor helping Mia paint a mural of dragons and castles. Watching him interact with her daughter, seeing the careful attention he gave to Mia's stories and ideas, Violet felt something she had not expected to feel again. Hope. Not just for professional success, but for a future that included love and partnership. As for Scarlet, Richard had indeed broken off their engagement after learning the full extent of her schemes. She had tried to salvage her reputation, but word had spread through their social circles about what she had attempted. Scarlet eventually moved to another city, starting over where fewer people knew her story. Standing in the autumn sunshine with Julian beside her and Mia holding her hand, Violet realized that her sister's cruelty had accidentally given her the greatest gift. It had brought her to that gala, to that moment with the spilled wine, to the beginning of something beautiful and real. Sometimes, she thought, the attempts to tear us down only reveal how strong we have been all along.